If you've ever looked at a world map, you may have wondered, why don't airplanes simply cut straight across the Pacific Ocean? The answer involves not just geography and science, but also history, wars, and even politics. Let's start with geography. Airplanes follow what are called Great Circle routes, the shortest path between 2 points on a sphere. On a flat map, these routes look curved, but on a globe, they are actually the most direct path. That's why flights between Asia and North America often pass over Alaska or the Arctic. But geography is only part of the story. In the early days of aviation, during the 1920s and 1930s, airplanes had limited range. They couldn't cross oceans non-stop. That meant Pacific flights had to island hop, stopping in places like Hawaii, Midway, and Guam. Pan American Airways pioneered this with its famous China Clipper service in 1935, linking the US with Asia through a series of stops. The Pacific was simply too vast for early aircraft to cross directly. World War II changed everything. The Pacific theater of the war forced the US to establish air bases across the Pacific, in Alaska, Hawaii, Midway, and the Philippines. These bases made long-distance flights possible, and many of them later became civilian airports. But even then, flights avoided the Central Pacific, where there were no safe landing points. Military needs shaped the air routes we still use today. After the war came the Cold War, and politics dictated how planes flew. The airspace of the Soviet Union and China was restricted to Western airlines. That meant flights between the US and Asia had to bend north, over Alaska and Canada, instead of taking a straight line across the Pacific or through Asia. This cemented the northern polar routes that are still common. Then came the jet age. The Boeing 707 in the late 1950s and the Boeing 747 in the 1970s could fly farther than ever before. For the first time, non-stop Pacific crossings were possible. But even with these long-range jets, airlines still preferred northern routes. Why? Because they were safer, more efficient, and often faster thanks to tailwinds from jet streams. By the 1980s and 1990s, aircraft technology had improved dramatically, yet the Central Pacific remained underused. It was still too risky for an emergency landing, and the jet stream winds made northern crossings more practical. Even with newer aircraft, the old routes were hard to beat. Today, modern airplanes like the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and Airbus A350 can fly almost anywhere non-stop. Technically, they could cross the Pacific directly, but airlines still avoid the Central Ocean. Why? Safety. Emergency landings are difficult. Weather. The Pacific is prone to storms and turbulence. And efficiency. Polar routes still save time and fuel. So the next time you look at your flight path curving over Alaska or Siberia, remember, it's not a mistake. It's the result of geography, safety, and a century of history. From Pan Am's island hops to Cold War restrictions to today's ultra-modern jets, aviation history explains why the Pacific is rarely crossed head-on. If you enjoyed this deep dive into aviation history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. There are many more fascinating stories from history and travel still to come.